Congratulations! You have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
The gates of hell are open night and day, smooth the descent and easy is the way. But to come back from hell and view the cheerful skies, in this the task and mighty labor lies. That and getting up on a Sunday to record a podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to the Lambcast. This is episode 755 and I'm your host Richard Kirkham from Kirkham A Movie A Day. 24 years after Gladiator became Ridley Scott's biggest movie and kicked off Russell Crowe's 2000 era, Scott returns to tell the story of Lucius Verus, the nephew of Commodus, in the original movie. Played by Paul Mescal in the much-anticipated sequel, Lucius walks a path similar to the man who inspired him as a boy. Strength and honor and recent two-time winner Aaron Neuwirth are with us from We Live Entertainment and Out Now with Aaron and Abe. Welcome back, Aaron.
I'm not a Spaniard, but I'm happy to be here.
Daniel Chadwick-Shubat of Get Real Movies will tell us if he was entertained. Welcome back to the arena, Daniel.
Are you not entertained? I am entertained to be here.
And although she missed out on Barbenheimer last year, she made sure to join us for Glicked Wickinator, Nicole Ayers of the MadLabPost.
Thanks for having me in your arena, Richard. I hope that I'm going to be able to survive this one.
Well, we don't have any baboons or rhinoceroses to challenge us, so I think we'll probably be able to get through this in one piece. Gladiator II. Well, after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Coliseum and must look to his past to find strength to return to the glory of Rome back to its people. We're going to start with our general thoughts. We'll keep a spoiler wall up for about 20 minutes or so, folks. So whoever wants to begin, that would be fine. Daniel, it's been a while since you've been on the show. Why don't we start with you? Generally, what were your thoughts on Gladiator II?
So I went into this movie, I'll be honest, I was very, very excited for it because it was one of those films that I just love. Gladiator. It's one of those movies from my teenage years that just really inspired me and really got me into film at the time. And I'm a big Russell Crowe fan, and so Ridley Scott coming back to this world was something that really excited me, and I really built it up. The worst thing I could say about this film is that I watched Gladiator beforehand, and that kind of took away a bit of the awesomeness of this film. I think it's well done. It's definitely an exciting film, but it just doesn't live up to the original in my mind. I still enjoyed it. I still think it's a perfectly fine film that people will love seeing in theaters. I think Denzel is just epic and steals every scene that he is in. And I personally am a big fan of Paul Mescal as an actor, but he is it's glaringly obvious that he is not Russell Crowe. And every time he's, doing these big speeches in front of fellow gladiators, it's just hard to believe that people want to follow him the way they wanted to follow the Spaniard. So I was a little bit disappointed. I still enjoyed it. I still think it's worth seeing in theaters, but it's nowhere near that level of the original.
That sounds reasonable. Nicole, are you equally reasonable, or do you have some hate for what's going on here?
I would say that I'm equally reasonable. Just like Daniel, I watched Gladiator again before I went to see the second one, and I was looking forward to watching it. I will say that I came for Denzel, but I stayed for, the battle. And after watching it, I think I still like the first one the best. I think that the original Gladiator ages very well. But this movie, this second one, I was a little bit underwhelmed during the first and third acts. I like the second act of the movie the best, but I agree that it is worth seeing in the theater. If you do go see it in the theater, I would recommend watching it at a multiplex or a theater with good sound. I went to a two-screen art house theater that needs some upgrades, and the sound on the movie wasn't great, but I still found Gladiator 2 visually pleasing overall. So I would recommend the movie. I don't think that it tops the original though. I think that the Russell Crowe one is a stronger play. I also will say that I started wondering if I went to the right movie when I sat down during the first act, because I wondered, I came to watch Gladiator, and then I was wondering if I was watching an AI generated spinoff of The Planet of the Apes or something like that. But that's that. I would recommend it. And I might see it again at like a multiplex that has better sound treatment, audio treatment.
Oh, the days when the multiplex was the secondary choice as opposed to the first choice. That's a different time and place, boy, I tell you. But I do know the sound issues that you're talking about. That would make a difference. Aaron, were you able to hear the movie where you saw it?
Yes, because I saw it in some pretty cool places that I don't need to get into necessarily. But the movie, to provide some context, the first Gladiator is a film that I think is very fun as a summer blockbuster, but I think it's a terrible Best Picture winner. So, I don't have a lot of, I don't say I don't have a love for Gladiator, but, I don't hold it in much high regard. I think it's a really, like I said, fun entry for Ridley Scott, putting himself in that kind of arena. I like some of his other historical epics more. So coming into Gladiator 2, I was like, okay, there's room for improvement. Let's see what we can do here. When he put Denzel in the cast, I'm like, well, I mean, we already have a good movie at least, so we have that going for us. And then they're teasing rhinos and naval battles, and I'm like, why would I not want to see this? So I got pretty excited. I got more excited than I was expecting to see a sequel to Gladiator 24 years later. So going to see Gladiator, I would say I feel like I agree with Daniel and Nicole so far. As far as I think it's very entertaining. I think the work from this ensemble cast is mostly pretty solid. I would say the biggest drawback is, while I think Paul Mescal is quite good, he doesn't have the Russell Crowe factor. That ultimately is why it brings this movie a bit down. I do think he's not being asked to do the same thing as Crowe, which is wise, because that's such a specific kind of leading man performance that no one can really replicate. So it's like, okay, let's get out of the way of that. Let's expand this cast to make them all kind of unique and interesting in their own ways, instead of giving letting one man shoulder all the weight. So you have Denzel doing amazing work because that's what he does. You have Pedro Pascal in here, who I also think is pretty excellent with a role that's pretty thin. You have these twin emperors. You have all this stuff that I think contributes quite well to the film. I think the action and what Scott's doing from a scale perspective looks fantastic. He has these great battle scenes. He's got these great fights. All this stuff is stuff that I'd expect to see from him, but it's still done well, and I'm happy to see it. I think the political machination stuff, that's the stuff that I don't like in the first movie. I think it's all kind of silly. And I think this one, I think, is equally silly, but because there's certain machinations at play involving characters I just like more, like watching Denzel or watching Connie Nielsen and Pedro Pascal, that stuff ultimately made me appreciate the backdealing side of this film a bit more than the first one. But again, it ultimately comes down to, is this a good action movie? And I think compared to the first one, yes, you have that Crowe factor and the people he's going up against and what have you. And I think it's more satisfying as a movie as a whole compared to this one. But still, I had a good time watching Gladiator 2.
Well, I'm glad that everybody's having a good time. I had a good time as well. Echoing something that Nicole was saying, you need to see this in a good theater, I think. That will add to it. I made the effort to see it in an XD theater, which is the equivalent of an IMAX for Cinemark. And in order to get into a screening, I had to go to an 8:30 a.m. show. So I was up bright and early, and It's a pretty long movie, but I was there for it, and I was very entertained. So in that question, are we entertained? I will definitely say I was entertained. I enjoyed it. I think more than I was expecting to. I didn't have high hopes for it because I do have a high esteem for Gladiator. I think that Gladiator itself succeeded largely on those two main performances, Joaquin Phoenix and Russell Crowe, and we don't get anything that is equivalent to those two performances in this film. You can't take Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal, that's not hard to mix up, and put them together and say, well, that gives us one Russell Crowe. It doesn't work that way. Russell Crowe has got a lot of charisma, and whoever it was earlier who mentioned it, Daniel, it might have been you talking, or maybe it was Aaron talking about him giving the speeches. Paul Mescal does not have the same impact that Russell Crowe is having in that first film, and doubling the number of emperors doesn't make the film equivalent. And of course, they go in a very different direction than Commodus, and it's a lot more cartoony as a result. In Gladiator, although it sometimes stretches a little bit to seem realistic, I thought it really felt like it was in the reality world. In this one, it felt a lot more like it was sort of like a Ray Harryhausen film minus the stop-motion critters. We got CGI critters instead, because we have that sea battle that features sharks. We've got a guy riding a rhinoceros like he's a cowboy. I know they're upping the ante to make the action more interesting, but it felt a little bit more comic bookish. And then when we see the two emperors playing off each other like a bad Abbott and Costello routine and dressed up like dolls from some movie with Karen Carpenter being portrayed by Barbie dolls, it just seemed like it was a little too precious. That said, though, like I said, I was very entertained. I think you've got 4 or 5 spectacular action sequences in this, and Denzel once again I think he's the best working actor we have, and I know that he's talked about maybe retiring from acting soon.
He took that back pretty quickly.
I hope that's not true. Good, because I think he's still got it, and he is very effective in the part, even though the part I think is still underwritten, and he doesn't have the same. I'm afraid he didn't even impress me as much as Oliver Reed did in the first film, and Oliver Reed died halfway through making the movie. So, but that's a story issue. It's not Denzel's performance there. It's just that there's just a lack of clarity about what's going on, and I know Aaron liked the backstage machinations on this film better than in the first film. I probably would feel the opposite about that, but we'll get into that in more detail as we go along.
Well, and I think that what's interesting about this film is I think a lot of these characters wouldn't be out of place in a movie like 300. So I felt as though the first one was very grounded and felt much more like it was using the history as a backdrop rather than just kind of casting it aside. And we all know about Ridley Scott's sort of disregard for history and historians and being accurate. And that's fine when you're making, really good films. I mean, I love Ridley Scott. I love Prometheus. I love Blade Runner. And there's a lot of stuff that he's done that, makes him one of those directors on one of my top 10 director lists. But with this film, you really felt the length as well. And I almost laughed at times when Paul Mescal was doing his speeches, because I just didn't feel any of that emotion that you felt with Russell Crowe. And, physically he was in as good a shape, if not better than Russell Crowe, but he just didn't convince me as Lucius, as this, battle hardened, gladiator who I just didn't really care about him. I didn't care about his wife. They underutilized quite a few characters that we'll talk about a little bit more when we get into the spoiler section. But I think there were so many other choices they could have made that would have made this film a lot better. And I'm not one of those people who thinks that it shouldn't have been made, because I was happy it was. And again, I thought that Denzel was great. That's something that happens in some Ridley Scott movies, depending on who writes it, is some of the characters are underwritten. But when you have Russell Crowe delivering those lines, it doesn't really matter, right? So I just, yeah, it was kind of disappointing. Especially the main characters. I disagree. I think Pedro Pascal was, I don't know, kind of just there. I didn't think he brought anything special to Acacius. I didn't care about him when he got shot. When he got, sorry, let me rephrase that because we don't want to do spoilers. When he has things happen to him in the film, it was more like, oh well, let's move on to the next scene. I didn't think Pascal was that formidable, and I think that by far Washington was the only shining light in terms of acting in this film, to me at least.
What I like about Pascal is that he's, for one thing, he's not trying to play it big, and I think that comes from what the film's demanding of his character. He's playing this guy who's this amazing general and easily the best fighter in the movie. Like, if he wanted to take out the main person he goes up against, he could have, but he's in a position where he doesn't want to. But he so has so much disdain for these emperors. He doesn't care about fighting for Rome, or at least the Rome that's currently presented to him. And then he has this other conflict on top of that where he's, with the mother of an opponent of his. Like, I like that it gives him a lot of internal conflict to play into. That's stuff that I appreciated, because now I can agree the character itself, I think, is underwritten, but I think the way Pascal plays it, there's something there that I did appreciate. It's something about whatever his weird charisma is that has him being called Zaddy on the internet. Like, I think it worked here for me. Like, there's something about whatever he's doing where, like, I was seeing it for what I feel like the first, like, and I like him in general. I think he's fine, but like watching him here is like, I feel like I get the thing that people have for Pascal in this movie. Like, that was just working for me. As far as because I want to get back to these emperors. I was like, this a little bit more, and then the political stuff that's going on. For one thing, I think Joaquin's terrible in the first Gladiator, so I didn't care about what they're going to do with these new emperors. But if you want to look at the first film and this film, what's interesting when you watch Gladiator, that's 2000. That's about this new emperor that comes into play. He has daddy issues and he wants to prove himself and all this stuff. That's a very prescient film to have when you think about America in 2000. And you have this is like your character. This film is, okay, things have somehow gotten worse in Rome since then. Now you have these blonde buffoons running the nation terribly. I wonder what that taps into. And in that regard, it's like, okay, if anything, it felt very, very relevant to me as far as how over the top and campy they're playing. It's like, well, that's kind of the world we're living in right now. Like, it has no real regard for, what the common people want, at least, in execution. And instead, it's just like these ridiculous guys that want to see nothing but blood and violence and chaos, because that's just their deal. That's like, I was in there thinking, these guys, and they think of themselves as like, at least summoned by God to some degree, or their gods for some degree. Like, that stuff, like, I'm not going to say that these are great performances from Joseph Quinn and Fred Heschinger, but I do think they're effective in relating what kind of world they live in this Rome, along with like what kind of world Ridley Scott is saying that he wants to convey through Gladiator. I think that's there.
Well, it felt to me a lot like an episode of I, Claudius.
Sure.
We've got particular vision of what the Roman Empire looked like at that time that feels, frankly, and it may be accurate, but it feels dated because of changes in the world that we live in the film world that we've been operating in for the last 40 years. And so having the togas look the way they do, the makeup on them, their effete presentation to the
stuff
world.
That Ridley Scott would research to the high extent to make sure it's accurate as possible. Yes, go on.
Yes, none of that is real. Okay.
No, I'm saying this is stuff he does. He will go. I know. We definitely know that the minutia that's there is stuff that he's done the research for. That's the kind of guy he is. Outside of like maybe some animals.
Even that he might have gotten wrong.
Well, I do understand that the baboons and rhinoceroses were things that they used in the Coliseum. The sharks definitely not.
I like his line. It was like, yeah, they just get some nets, catch some sharks. What's wrong with that? That's
an oversimplification.
The sharks, like, whatever. Like, I don't care. It's a Gladiator movie. What do I care about this? But the naval battle stuff I did appreciate, because like, yeah, I've always heard about that, flooding a Coliseum to see these battles.
Yeah. Before we get into the battles, I want to give Nicole a chance to talk about the characters and the actors a little bit, because I think she has been patient with us as we've been doing that, and I want to make sure that she doesn't have to sit on the sidelines while this is going
Oh,
on.
well, I like the discussion, especially when we got into the sharks, because people were actually laughing in the movie that I went, in the theater that I went to, when that shark scene appeared. And I was also trying to figure out what the animals in the first act were. So now I know that they were baboons. I'm like, are these monkeys, or like, what are these things, and did they exist back in the Roman era, or is this Hollywood, some Hollywood BS?
Exactly.
But
Well, they almost certainly were imported.
so
I don't think they're native to the Seven
Well,
Hills.
they just conquered Nubia. They
Yeah,
were in
there you
Africa.
go.
They got baboons.
and they came to get eaten by Mr. Lucian. I liked Pedro Pascal in this movie. I didn't know about his zaddy effect, but going in, but I liked him in. I haven't been familiar with the Star Trek franchise, and
Star
I've
Wars.
been in recent years. I've been getting into the Mandalorian and the Boba Fett show, and so I am familiar with him from that and from the TV show The Last of Us. And because I like him in both, I was happy that he was casted in this movie. I am happy with his role. I do think that I did find the character a little underwhelming, but I did still like the character, and that could be because I just like him in general. And so when I see him, I want to cheer for him. And there were some things in the movie that made me upset during some of his battles. I did appreciate that he was the strongest warrior in this film, even though Lucius is supposedly like the main character of the movie. I also liked how the audience knew that Lucius wanted, is it Acacius, wanted the general's head, but the characters didn't know that they wanted, that they were enemies, if you will. And so yeah, I like his acting. I think Paul Mescal did an okay job. I liked Connie Nielsen in this movie, but that's also just like Pedro Pascal. I'm happy to see her. Whenever I see her, I'm generally happy. So she's not one of my favorite actresses, but I do like if I see that she's going to be in a movie, then you know I'll be happy about it because I like to see her. And I mean, again, I came for Denzel. Denzel is Denzel. I I liked some of the humor in the movie, some of the banter. I thought that we haven't met the. I'll follow up on on the scene, on one of Denzel's scenes that was kind of gory.
Spoiler? Oh yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
gory later in the show. But I'll say, so my favorites in this movie were, Denzel, of course, Pedro. I thought that guy, is it Rory McCann? I think he did really well as a jerk.
Who are
I
you
think
thinking of?
he led the Gladiators or something. Like he was
He was
really
the
mean
supervisor.
to Lucius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't Robert Cat. It was another guy. But yeah, I liked him too.
Yeah, I think he did really
He's
well.
he's an Israeli actor. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, Leo Raz, who played Vigo. I just find it interesting you mentioned Denzel, Nicole. I think that he just had a lot of fun in this movie. I think that it was just him. It was acting, because I do think he was brilliant, but he just he just seemed to be just vibing in the film and just having a great.
He understood the assignment.
He did,
as we
yeah,
would say.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's what I thought. It seemed like he was just there to lend the good vibes and drink more wine.
he's the movie's wild card, where he can get away with a lot of stuff because he's not a gladiator, he's not an emperor. He can be this other guy on the side with his own intentions, and he's Denzel, so he brings plenty of fun to the role in a movie that should have fun. It's a gladiator movie. That's my thing with the first one. It's so self-serious, and it's like, I get the story it's trying to tell, but it doesn't. I like it when it's having fun in the world of gladiators, because it's just that genre doesn't speak to me as far as I need this to be prestige excellence. I want to have fun watching a gladiator movie. And
Yes,
I think
definitely.
Denzel, even when we're not in fights, Denzel's bringing that attitude to it, where he's effective, right? He's scheming behind the scenes, he's making bets, he's doing all this stuff to gain power. But he's also having the time of his life, dressed to the nines with his fancy tunics and his rings and all this stuff. This is great. Let me see all this all day.
Yes.
I love it when they've got rings on every finger.
And that's something that I didn't expect either. I wasn't expecting his character to have an agenda.
Sure, yeah.
Because the other guy, I don't know his name, in the original film, he seemed like he was out for blood. And because he was a former gladiator, he just seemed like he was there for the money and just the love of the sport. Whereas in this one, I wasn't expecting Denzel's character to have an agenda. But as he told Lucius, you will be my vessel. And I guess,
that was a good line. I did like that. And I do have to say, Aaron, I disagree. I loved the original, and maybe that's where we disagree, because I think
plenty people love it. I agree on this. Yeah.
Oh, and I totally get, not everyone has to love a film, obviously, but I just think that all the things the original did well, this movie kind of just threw to the side a little bit. And I get it wants to be its own film, but in the end, it just ends up being so much like Gladiator, but while also trying to be funny and silly, I guess. And so it's just, for me, I still think you have to care a little bit about the characters. And I can't really name one character who I cared about in this film, whereas in the original Gladiator, you could have a side character who died and it affected you in a big way. I think that this film, while it tries to do something different, maybe it should have had a better screenplay or a different story, potentially, in the same world, where it just wasn't so close to the original. Because my biggest issue was, I watched the original right before, and it's just so close to it. It barely varies in terms of story, and I think that's its biggest downfall.
I think that
it does repeat a lot of beats from the original story.
I think the arc that it's telling is familiar because it's a gladiator movie. There's not a lot of variation on this story. Become a gladiator out of some kind of defeat, gain the audience, win some battles, go against the emperor, revolution. That's unless you're Spartacus, that's every gladiator movie. There's not a lot you can really do with this, as we've been told, through 70 years of attempts to do sword and sandal stuff. It's that's all you really got. So I can agree with you, because I especially by the time it gets to the third act and it's delivering on whatever it's trying to do, it's okay, yeah, there's not really much difference here. There was an ending fight that took place. I'm like, oh, this is our solution. Okay, and that let me me down. It's I was ready for something else, and it's oh, okay, that's all we're getting, I guess. But in regard to the first one compared to the second one, I agree that, again, the Russell Crowe factor, I think, is such a huge deal. That's why I ultimately like the first one more. But in terms of how history is being used or whatnot, what I like about this movie is at least it's kind of willing to be shameless and not try to pretend that it's not. Where I think the first one, it's not like it's new to Ridley Scott to disregard history, because the first one has a lot of just nonsense stuff going on in too. With Marcus Aurelius' dream of Rome, that is complete bullshit. It always bugged me. The way they use Commodus is, again, I just don't think Phoenix is very effective in that role as much as the Academy,
Either
As much as
hate
the
him
rest
or
of the
love
world
him.
disagrees with
the
you.
Academy can say all they want to, but like he's just as hammy as anybody in this movie, and with the addition of the whining that he does about his dad not liking him as much and everybody liking Maximus more, it's just
I feel with
it's
that
very
role, you either
streamlined.
hate him or love him. There's no in between. You either love that performance or hate it. I haven't found many people who don't either despise it or absolutely love it for some reason. Whereas I'm I don't know, I'm like Russell Crowe all the way. I couldn't care less about Joaquin Phoenix in that film.
I mean,
but I don't have a
it's
hate
less of like a he's such a bad guy you love to hate him kind of performance, and it's more of I just don't think he's doing good acting in that movie. that's more my thing with him. It's obviously it's designed for you to hate him for sure because he's a terrible person, unlike reality where he was seemingly a pretty well respected emperor and actually fought in the arena and did this kind of stuff. But regardless, it's that the way it treats all that material to me is just. It feels so satisfied with being more than just the action movie that it is. It wants to be this prestige drama about Maximus uniting Rome and bringing back this idea that Marcus Aurelius had, which again is complete bullshit. So watching this one, I was at least into that stuff more because it wasn't trying to pretend that it's like we need to win Best Picture again. It didn't feel like that movie to me. It felt more like Ridley Scott's escapism. I
think you've got a very good point here that this one doesn't take itself as seriously, and it leans more into that entertainment, thread that this is really about the spectacle and about, like we said earlier, some of the exaggerated elements of the action sequences. I do want to get to the point where we can drop the spoiler wall so we can talk about some of those things. So anybody who's listening now, if you are concerned about the way the story goes, although as Aaron says, it's a gladiator story, there's an arc that is coming, so don't be too surprised about what's going on. But we are going to be talking about things that occur in the film now later on that might spoil things for you, so continue to listen at your own risk.
Okay, so
let's talk about the plot.
So we finally killed Derek Jacobi. That's all I wanted to say. That's.
Oh,
I was going to say Derek Jacobi has been playing these parts since I Claudius.
When he got it, I cheered. It's like finally, get rid of Jacobi.
That is terrible, Aaron. How could you say that about Sir Derek Jacobi? He is a sir now.
It was so offhanded too. It's like, hey, it's me, Grax. Oh no, I'm dead.
It was terrible. I was like, why even bring him back? Just kill him off screen if you're gonna do that. Like, at least let him go out a little more epically. It's like offhanded, off screen. I'm like, that's not how you say goodbye to that senator. Come on.
Well, there are other deaths and there are other elements that happened in the story. Were there any that you thought were not reasonable or would have liked to have seen resolved in a different way?
The battle scene with the Denzel seemed silly. I only say that from my observation of the audience's response when Lucius chopped off his arm and he was just they were in the water and there was a bit of not a pause, but there was a bit of a focus on that for a few seconds. The audience at the theater where I went to see this were laughing at that briefly. I wondered if that reminded them of not necessarily like a campy film, but like a horror movie or like a B movie where something like that, where a scene like that might fit. So I wonder if a different death
would have been appropriate.
Yeah.
Something that was a little bit less over the top.
Maybe an
Yeah.
alligator.
At least he didn't cut his head off with two swords.
I'm less of that death and more about Nicole's audience sucked. I think that's more the argument that I'd have with this.
Oh, okay.
Because like, I've seen it twice. And both times it was more of a satisfaction of that was pretty cool. That was more the reaction I had with my audiences. I also that fight itself, the way I look at it is I know this is not what actually happened, but in the script it felt like it was okay. They get in a tussle and Pascal wins, but then Denzel's like, no, I'm gonna kick you in the water and I'm gonna start trying to stab at him and do all this other it felt like it was the way he was fighting. It felt like a lot of improv. I know that's not what happened, obviously, but like the way became like went from like dust up brawl to I'm gonna kick him in the water and start stabbing him under the water with my sword and everything, then get my hand cut off. It's like, all right.
Well, I'm not quite clear when Maximus's armor became Kevlar and was able to prevent the sword from penetrating it. That seemed a little
That's
excessive.
been true. It's the same armor. Like it's.
Did we have see, I didn't rewatch Gladiator beforehand, and by the way, that might be an advantage to people if you
100%.
Don't want it to suffer by comparison. Maybe skip watching Gladiator beforehand. But I don't remember that Maximus's armor turned away swords before, but I could be wrong. It's been
scrapes.
10 years since I saw it.
He gets scrapes on it because it's that's why it's called armor. I mean, you can't just poke through it with a sword like that. You gotta get around them.
Apparently, the point of a sword, whether it's wood or steel, does the job.
Well, yeah, maybe it's because it's in water, and Denzel is a 70-year-old man, to be fair to him. So
yeah, that was the one I was thinking of. That he's taken on a guy who's half his age, and he hasn't been operating as a gladiator for a while. So that seems a little impractical. But you know what? They never say what his age is actually. So maybe he's only 50.
He took over Rome in a week. He seems pretty strong to me.
It was like watching that Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. It was a bit ridiculous, a bit stupid, and at the end you were like, what happened?
I didn't like Pascal's death, I will say, because I was rooting for him to make it to the end of the movie. I wanted him to stay alive, but I don't know if I would have missed Lucius if he got killed. But I will say, during the last fight scene with Denzel, I think I knew that Denzel was going to get killed, because in my head I was thinking, like, this is Lucius, so they can't kill him. Like, he has to live. It's like...
Well, we got Gladiator 3 coming, so we got to have him.
Yeah.
I think if the movie had ended with Denzel killing Lucius and then Rome just becoming a burning smolder, after Denzel took it over, I think that would have been a much superior ending. I get why you liked Pascal, Nicole, and I wouldn't argue with you on that. I know a lot of people really like him, but when he died, it was also kind of but for me, there weren't really any characters I cared about. Denzel, I really, really liked him, but I wasn't devastated when he died either. So it's just a very strange film where, like Richard said, you can do yourself a service by not watching the first one. I think that's what kind of made me a little sour on this film compared to the original. But I think some of the choices they made could have been made differently. But I can't really argue with the results either. It's already doing quite well at the box office, and it is a fun one. I just think I felt the length more than I have in the original and previous Ridley Scott films. I don't mind a long movie. But this one, you can feel it. I felt. Maybe, I don't know, do you guys disagree with that, or did you feel the length as well?
I agree.
I thought it was long when I was watching it, but then I went and saw Wicked Part 1 later on.
That changes things.
And I thought, holy criminy, they are so much more efficient in Gladiator 2.
I can't say an issue with the pacing all that much. Like, the first Gladiator's long, and I think it's also quite long. Like, I watched it again after I saw Gladiator 2 the first time, because we did a commentary for it on our podcast, and I forgot how long Marcus Aurelius is in the first movie, like all the before Commodus takes over. It's like, this takes a while to really get going. So I don't know. Like, these things don't really. When it's Ridley Scott, I'm like, yeah, here we go. Let's get another 2.5-hour movie in here. I kind of expect that.
Well, I think Scott played to his strengths, because we start with the battle sequence. We've got 3 or 4 major events in the Coliseum. We've got a couple of fight sequences that happen outside of those circumstances, and that's where his visual style comes into play the best.
For sure.
I saw that movie, The Last Duel, a couple of years ago, and there was so much in that movie that was good, but the battle at the end was fantastic, and that's just one of those things that Scott does well.
It's like Kingdom of Heaven too. Not a particularly fantastic film, but my
favorite Ridley Scott movie. I love Ridley.
Yeah.
I love Kingdom of Heaven. it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I think it's a fantastic film too, and especially the director's cut. I messed with that hard, but I think that you're totally correct. He does know how to do battles, and especially period pieces. As much as it's not historically accurate, even Napoleon, the battle scenes are pretty epic, and even though they make no sense historically, they're fun to watch.
If we want to talk about Ridley's like style, like what I like in Gladiator 2 is like compared to Gladiator, like you can see his evolution as a filmmaker, whether that's for better or worse. Gladiator comes out around the same time as Saving Private Ryan, where they have this kind of stutter approach to slow motion and stuff, where it can work sometimes, but it's somewhat distracting. This movie, the action I think flows in a way that it's filmed better. Like whether or not it's as satisfying. That's a different topic, but I think in terms of the look of this movie, I like where he's at now, and he has the same cinematographer here too. So it's like, all right, like it's clearly Ridley's where he's at now as far as how he makes movies compared to how he was in the 2000s. Like Hannibal, I think suffers the worst from it, where it has a lot of like this stuttery slow motion thing going on, where it's like this makes this already bad movie worse. But Gladiator, I think too. I mean, guys, like we haven't even talked about some of the rhinoceros fight, the baboon fight, like the
baboons looked like vampires. It was very weird.
Have you ever seen a baboon?
Yeah,
I've seen baboons. They look like vampires. they're nasty little creatures, and they're mean. And they're
big.
The
faces are very much accurate, but I do think that was the wonkiest CGI in the film.
Sure.
Was the baboons.
I've been to Africa, I've seen baboons. If I want to see a fleet of baboons in a movie, that's about as good as it's going to get. I feel like that's and dude, bites of baboons are like, I'm all about this. I'm all about like just the vicious baboon violence that goes on in this movie.
If Liam Neeson can punch a wolf in the face, we can have Paul Mescal bite a baboon in the arm.
Ugh, that was gross.
It spits it out. And the baboon's like, wait a minute, what happened here?
Hey, wait a second.
The baboon has such a we talk.
Not fair.
Wonky CGI, but I have never seen a baboon be like, what just happened? Like that kind of look on his face.
Well, I remember a while back I interviewed John Matheson, the cinematographer for Logan at the time, and I asked him a little bit about Gladiator as well. And he had mentioned at that time that they were already thinking about doing Gladiator 2. But I do agree that in terms of how cool it looks, this film definitely increases that compared to the original. But the original was also just a completely different movie. So I think I just need to view these movies as they are. One's an Oscar winner, and the other is just a fun action flick, you know? And I think that maybe on a rewatch that might help this movie age a little better for me as I watch it again.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to the point where we're going to wrap up our discussion of Gladiator 2. Does anybody have any final thoughts, something that you haven't had a chance to talk about that you'd like to get in before we move on?
I liked how they gave the twins different personalities. You have the one that thinks he's a god, or that he speaks for God, or that God speaks through him. And then you have the other one who wants to appoint a monkey to
his first council.
Yes. And I just love
our Caligula.
Yes. I love that. As ridiculous as they are overall as Caesars, I do still love the decision to still give them their own personalities so that they can each be two separate characters. The scene where the brother with the monkey was trying to kill the other brother, I forgot if he says he thinks that he's under some kind of spell, and he's like, stop the spell or break the spell or something like that.
Well, he's under Denzel's spell, so we know that there's just craziness going on there.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt that he's syphilitic and his brain is disappearing.
I was under Denzel's spell too, just for the record. So.
Yes, there you go. But you don't have syphilis, right?
As far as I know.
So that is what it was. I wondered why the one brother thought that he said something about, the affliction in his loins has spread to his brain earlier, like in the movie. And I wondered what that meant. I was like, wait, does that mean that the brother doesn't have manly parts, or like, is he, like, what's going on there? So it was syphilis. Okay.
That was my impression.
I mean, they're guys that, excess is the name of the game for them. They're having sex all the time while eating grapes and all that stuff. I mean, I'm sure, yes, they have at least one of them who's already, I think, a little mentally not there. Probably, yeah, not exactly a complete picture of health.
Yeah. Debauchery at its best.
Uh-huh.
Anything else folks want to add before we close up?
Yeah, the ending of this movie has the same thing as the first one for me, where there's two people in the center of an arena, basically, and there's people that are close to them that can kind of see and hear what's going on. But then you have, like, entire armies around them, and in the first one you have, like, the entire Coliseum. I have to think that people in the back are like, what just happened? Like, where are the emperors? They died. Oh, who's in the center? Lucius. Who's Lucius? The son of another guy. Who's the other guy? Macrinus. The arms dealer? Why is he there? He kind of took over. Why did he take over? Well, it's complicated. So he just killed the Gladiator one? What's going on? I don't know. We'll catch up later. We'll get the news report on what happened.
Oh, you just reminded me when you said that, something else that I wondered when I was watching this. Who is Lucius's father? Like,
Maximus.
Is it Maximus? Like,
Well, that's what they've retconned on.
I walked out of this like, is he the? And if he's Maximus's child, is he like an illegitimate child? Because Maximus had a child in the first one, and I thought that Lucius's father died, but then I also considered the possibility that his father might also be his uncle from the first movie. So then when they did this whole thing where Maximus is now the father in the second movie, when the movie was over, I was like, wait, who? We need
Lucilla was quite
on this.
She was getting around quite a bit.
It's weird because Maximus seems like the most valiant man around. Is like, when did he have an affair? Like, when did this happen?
Yeah, I have one last thing to say. I have one last thing to say, Richard, and thank you, Aaron, for reminding me. But you said they can read about it in the news later. I'm sure they can in the newspaper that someone was reading at a table with coffee 1,000 years before the printing press
printing presses
was invented. So I'm sure they can read about it in the newspaper that definitely existed in Roman times.
It was delivered by the papyrus boy.
Oh, of course. Yes, sorry. Yes, my bad. So that was my final thought.
All right. Well, we're going to close up right now. We're going to take a quick break to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, but we'll be back with our exit question in just a minute.
Hey, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Abe.
And together, we host
Out Now with Aaron and Abe.
Hey, we pulled that off.
Hey.
This is a weekly review show, right? We talk about movies on a weekly basis.
And other things.
Yeah, we have commentary tracks, we have lots of guests.
A lot of bonus episodes, a lot of game talk, a lot of sports talk.
Yeah, somehow sports talk factors in there along with Simpsons references for whatever reason.
So give us a listen. We're everywhere podcasts are found.
Yeah, they're everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Out now with Aaron and Abe.
Coming live.
Sometimes? I think it's in there. I can edit that together.
We're back, and it's time for our exit question of the week. We had a legacy sequel here this week with Gladiator II. As I mentioned earlier, it's 24 years since the original film came out. And so that prompted this thought. We've been seeing a lot of these kinds of things come along over the last couple of years. We had the Top Gun movie, and they retconned the Jurassic Park franchise a little bit and did that. So my question for this week is real simple. What other film, with at least 2 decades between its release and now, could potentially justify a sequel? So, Nicole, we're going to start with you because I know you're on the clock. What films did you think of that you think we could have a sequel, and these films are at least 20 years old?
I actually thought of 4 films initially, but I wasn't sure if 3 of them had 24 films between when they came out and now. So I won't go with those three. I'll go with the fourth, but I'll mention them: Mystic River, Sleepers, and Heat. However, my main pick came down to Kids. It's an independent film that came out in 1995, directed by Larry Clark. And it's about a teenager named Telly who's on a quest to sleep with as many virgin girls as possible. However, Telly also happens to have HIV, but he doesn't tell any of these conquests about that. So while he's trying to find his next virgin girl, he hangs out with his best friend named Casper. They do things that degenerate teenagers do around New York City. But meanwhile, there's a teenage girl named Jenny. She's one of the girls that Tully slept with previously. She makes it, her mission to try to save like other girls from him. But before she tries to confront him at a party, things don't go as planned. According to Wikipedia and Google, they go horribly wrong. I own this movie. I bought it, but I have it on VHS. I have yet to get the DVD. I don't even know if it's out on DVD, but I think that given today's climate, and there seems to be a huge generation of young children and teenagers who are completely out of control because they either don't have parents, or their parents don't know how to parent, or they have parents who are nearly the same age as they are. So they are committing crimes and causing havoc in too many places around the country. And I think that if there was a sequel to Kids that came out today, I think that could be used as like a scared straight tool. I don't know if there's anyone who's familiar with the program that they used to have in school called Scare Straight. I think there was a movie that came out about that too, but I think it could be used as a vessel. I'll use Denzel.
So what you're saying is you want a spiritual sequel because all of the original people would probably be dead from HIV infections, and we have similar kinds of circumstances happening here, and we'd tell a parallel story dealing with more contemporary threats to kids at this age.
Yes, I would love that. Or even like a movie that shows how generational afflictions can continue if adults don't nip them in the bud, if they don't identify them, take accountability for them, and nip them in the bud. So maybe if there was a sequel where the children of these teenagers or their grandchildren are wreaking havoc on society, but somebody finds the light. I don't know, but maybe it came out in '95, so I figured that might fit the bill.
It's old enough. It certainly
qualifies. Of the films I didn't see coming to be mentioned as, we need a sequel to this now. Kids is not on my list.
Kids.
Afterwards, I wish that I could think of something epic with lots of action, because I love war movies and like action movies. But I just immediately started thinking of movies that I thought were really good and that could use like a sequel, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I love the choice. That's great.
He's a great choice as well, because as far as I know, they're actually doing a prequel now for that film. So he would have been was a great choice too. It's a prequel sequel.
I've read the book.
Cool.
It's great. So like I can't wait to see what Michael Mann does with another Heat.
Especially after Ferrari, I kind of got excited with Michael Mann again. Black Hat made me a little worried, but then Ferrari got me
Went
back.
Nowhere. Very good. Well, Nicole, I know that you have a work commitment, and I appreciate your joining us for the time that you were available. I'm going to let you head off to labor, as they say.
Thanks, for having me. Thanks, guys. And I'm so glad that you're here for my picks for the exit question. And, I look forward to streaming the Lambcast on YouTube. For those listening, watch, and subscribe.
All right. Thank you. Watch and subscribe. Thank you.
See you, everyone.
All right.
Nice to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Daniel, what did you come up with as something that could use a legacy sequel?
So I had two choices prepared just in case someone stole mine, but luckily I get to go before Aaron. So Aaron, apologies if I've stolen yours, but I was inspired because Gladiator, and I thought of Russell Crowe, and I thought of what is the one Russell Crowe film that I need a sequel to, and I'm still hoping for, and that's Master and Commander.
Oh my God,
Side
yes.
of the World. It is just an absolute classic film. I think it ages better and better each year I do watch it. I love Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany. I think their chemistry is fantastic. I think this might be Peter Weir, one of his best movies, his magnum opus, I'd say. And I think it just had the unfortunate problem of coming out around the same time as Pirates of the Caribbean, so it didn't do as well in the box office as people maybe wanted it to. But I honestly hope that they decide to redo this one day and do it again with Russell Crowe. And I think he's been actively campaigning for it as well. I think he would be able to get in good enough shape. I've heard he's been losing some of that weight that he gained from having too many steak sandwiches and pints, but I love that film. There's not a bad thing I can really say about it. It's one that as a kid I saw and was absolutely amazed, and it made me just start to imagine all the great things you can do on film. And I think it was actually criminally underrated and still is to this day. But most film fans that I know love it as well. So I think that's one. And then the other one that I would mention is more of a fun one, and that's Galaxy Quest. I think that's a fun movie that came out a long time ago that was really kind of spoofing on all the sci-fi films at the time. I had a lot of fun with it, and I think something similar where they kind of made fun of a lot of the crap out there now. I know some people have been underwhelmed with the new Star Wars stuff, and I think that they could, really run with it and have fun with it. And I think that I love that cast as well. We'd obviously miss Alan Rickman a lot, but I think that it's something you could do a lot of fun things with and a fun cast as well.
Well, I like both of those choices. I think Master and Commander is one of those films that a lot of people feel exactly as you do. There should have been at least 3 or 4 more movies in that series.
I've talked about Master and Commander before, as far as it, like, I get what, of course you want more of this. It's great. It was up for 10 Oscars. Like, it was a liked movie, but just it didn't make a lot of money. But it's also like $100 million art movie. So it's like,
sure,
it's hard to make that again because, like, well, they didn't show up the first time. They're not going to show up the second time. If they made it a series, I could see that happening. It's just not going to be the same because it won't be Peter Weir and Russell Crowe. It'll just be the show of Master and Commander, which is, I don't know. For sure. But it rules. It's a fucking great movie. I love Master and Commander. It's awesome.
Aaron, what'd you come up with?
This was the easiest question for me because I've always had this answer when it comes to, like, why do we not have this? And it's Devil in the Blue Dress, the Easy Rollins character from author Walter Mosley. Speaking of Denzel, by the way, I like all these stupid Equalizer movies suck. I can't stand them. It's the worst thing Denzel's ever done, and he's done fucking 3 of them. It just destroys me. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here being like, why are we not getting Easy Rollins sequels? There's 14 novels. What came out this year? Like, we should be doing this. Should be his signature character that he can come back to anytime he, like, both wants to, like, get money for another August Wilson adaptation, which are all great, and also, like, have a fun character that audiences like make this a thing. I'm so sick of Equalizer. Like, I don't like any of these
4
movies.
and 5 is coming out, by the way.
Oh my God! Don't even get me started on how disappointing that is. Or, like, I mean, at least he can keep the Netflix August Wilson train going. That's the one thing I have going with Denzel taking on these stupid Equalizer movies. Meanwhile, where's Easy Rollins? Where's Don Cheadle's mouse? Get this back. We need all of this. There could have been. You talk about sequels we could have had. We could have had like 6 of these movies by now. There's been. Well,
the weakness here is not the stories or the characters. It was the box office.
Of course it is.
And that explains why we've gotten the Equalizer movies, because they've worked when it comes to bringing in money.
Should have just did this instead. Just brought them back. Make these legacy sequels.
Well, I was thinking, you guys found, I think, very serious films that could use a legacy sequel, and I appreciate that. When I started thinking about this, I thought, well, Amadeus II, Solari's Nightmare in 3D. I don't think that's going to quite do it. Gandhi 2 has already been taken care of by the Weird Al film, so we're not going to get that.
Definitely not serious, that one.
So,
Gandhi 2.
Yeah, so I was, but I did think of some films that, especially 80s films, that I think could really work. I don't understand why we don't have Jack Burton back as a character in a sequel to Big Trouble in Little China. I thought that movie was a blast, and that character was stupid enough to clearly be a recurring character in a series of films.
Because it was a giant
box
bomb,
office
yeah,
issue.
That's why.
Yeah, the same issue.
Let's just make it clear, though. Jay Cluett loves Big Trouble in Little China. If there's one thing that Jay Cluett loves, it's Big Trouble in Little China. Jay Cluett, Big Trouble, definitely simpatico.
Yes, my predecessor on this show, he would be thrilled to have a sequel to Big Trouble in Little China.
If there's one movie he doesn't hate and doesn't understand why other people love, it's Big Trouble in Little China. He loves that movie.
Yes, and I'm sure he's going to name his first child Jack Burton. Second
child Alan Grant, first child. Yes.
But the movie that occurred to me, and I don't think it's possible now because the cast has moved on. Maybe they could work it out. I was always expecting a sequel to Silverado, the Western from 1985. There was supposed to, they just didn't succeed. As we said with these other films, there wasn't a monetary investment that was going to return adequately to justify, whatever you called it, Silverado 2 or Off to California or wherever they were headed. But we had the 4 characters at the end of the film, and we had the promise that they were going to reunite at another point, and they just never did. And that would have been the movie that I would have most enjoyed seeing a sequel to. I don't quite think you could get away with it now, although is everybody still alive? Yeah, we still have Costner. He's still making Westerns. Kevin Kline, he's still around. Scott Glenn, he's still
around.
with us.
He acts. He's doing stuff.
Yeah, and Danny Glover, same thing. So, but I think they are a little long in the tooth to be making a sequel at this point. But maybe they get away with it. It's like the Over the Hill Gang kind of thing. They could do something like that.
Well, and Richard,
I'd say the same about Buckaroo Banzai was another one I considered. That.
Oh, I want Against the World Crime League so bad.
Well, and I had 2 films that I really wanted to mention, but they weren't in that 2-decade mark, which is, by the way, 2004 is 2 decades ago, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, you're old.
We're old. I'm afraid.
Well, I'm not that old, so I'm not going to put myself in that train with you guys, or you'll get mad at me. But I do think 2 movies that sprung to mind. One was The Nice Guys, which I know was 2016, but I hope they one day do a sequel for that. And then a funny one that I thought I'd mention, Juror Number 3. Why not do Juror Number 3 after Juror Number 2?
Nicholas just holds his back, and he's guilty again.
and I have to say I missed Juror Number 1, so I was a little confused when I was seeing Juror Number 2. If only the prequel had been as clear.
No, honestly, unbelievable.
Well, guys, before we finish up here, I want to give you a chance to promote whatever it is that you have that people could turn their eyes and ears to. Aaron, let's start with you because I know you're a busy guy. You've got a lot of stuff that you've been looking at lately. Where can people see it, and what is it that you want them to see?
Well, I'm sure I am busy. Yeah, I can be I'm the editor-in-chief over We Live Entertainment. All my movie reviews can be found there. I write Blu-ray and Criterion reviews on whysoblue.com. I host the podcast Out Now with Aaron and A with my friend Abe. We talk about weekly movie releases, and we've certainly had our work cut out for us recently with all these new movies coming out, and we'll have plenty more coming as award season goes on. Everything I do can be found on my personal Substack page, thecodeofzeke.substack.com. And I'm on all the socials at Aaron's PS4.
And we'll make sure to get all that in the notes so that people can find those things. Daniel, how about you? What have you got to promote? What kinds of things should people be looking for from you?
So at the start of the year, I rebooted my podcast, as you mentioned before, the Get Real Movies podcast, real spelled with a double E, because I'm fantastic like that. And the premise of the podcast is to interview people whose stories have been turned into true story films, or if everyone's dead, to interview an ancestor or a historian about it. So I started at the start of this year, and my first episode was with Robert Bellot from Dark Waters, and we've had some good guests on since then. We did Tag as well, and we interviewed some of the real people behind the movie Tag, and
Cool.
And we're going to be interviewing a historian about Gladiator II. So I've had a lot of fun with that. You can find us everywhere on social media at Get Real Movies, real spelled with a double E. We're on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything like that. And if you want to read some of our reviews, we also have the website, getrealmovies.com. So thank you very much for having me on, Richard. It was a pleasure speaking with you once again.
It was great having you, and I appreciate every time people come on the show, because I know everybody's busy and they've got their own projects that they're working on. As usual, my enthusiasm for podcasting comes down to the fact that I get a chance to talk to other people who like talking about movies, and that's the value of a podcast like the Lambcast, because we get a diverse group of folks who are happy to share their thoughts about a film, and that's what we got this week. On my site, which is dedicated to basically writing about films that I've seen in a theater, I'm still committed to the theatrical experience, but once in a while I have special programs that I work on outside of that, but I'm still trying to keep up with the things that I've seen in theaters. I have the reviews of the two horror films that recently came out, Smile 2 and Heretic, both of which I would recommend. They have their flaws, but I think there's a lot of entertainment value to be had in them. I haven't put up the post yet, but I went to a presentation the other night in a theater, so it counts, from Josh Brolin talking about his book. And so Robert Rodriguez, the director, interviewed him here in Austin, Texas, and they made the book available when we bought the tickets. So I got a signed copy of the book. I'm halfway through the book. It's interesting, and the talk that we had was great. So anybody who's interested in doing a little reading, that would be something that you might look forward to as well. From Under the Truck was the name of is the title of Josh Brolin's book.
Cool.
Well, that's been it this week, my friends. Appreciate everybody showing up for Gladiator II and at least making time for that. And I'm just thankful that I didn't have to talk about Wicked Part 1.
Why is it a Part 1, Richard? Why?
I don't understand. I was so surprised earlier in the week when I discovered that it was only Part 1. I said, "You're kidding me, right?" And I never saw the play. I don't want to crap on all the theater kids out there who love this, but I don't get it. So that's just me. You know, I love musical theater, but this is not the musical theater that I love. You know, I'd be willing to go back to New York and see The Outsiders again before I ever saw Wicked.
Bring back Adele Dazeem.
Thank you. I was trying to remember how Travolta pronounced it at the Oscars the other day when my daughter asked me. She said, "You recognized her?" I said, "Oh yeah, that's what's her name that Travolta can't pronounce."
Now you know.
Now we know. All right. Well, before I mispronounce anybody else's name, thank you all for joining us this week on the Lambcast, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha